good evening, everyone, and thank you all for tuning in and for subscribing to my new channel. Due to the interest my first video about why I quit being a flight attendant and why I feared for my safety generated, I've decided to do a follow-up with my final video about my career as a flight attendant entitled Reasons to Be or Not to Be a Flight Attendant. Now, as a disclaimer, my views and opinions are based solely on personal experience. Therefore, everything I discuss is based on my opinions and my experiences alone and are not a reflection of the sentiments of other flight attendants. I have read comments on articles and posts and received criticism myself about going into the aviation industry blindly, receiving the typical, oh, well, you should have done more research before being a flight attendant, and so on and so forth, just to justify myself a little. I had been interested in being a flight attendant in the past, and it was a friend of mine that quit teaching to become one that encouraged me to apply, just to try it out. And I wasn't sure if the switch was going to be temporary or permanent, but I just decided to hell with it. I just went ahead and went for it. Yes, I went to it blindly, and I was aware of some of the challenges that the profession potentially presented. But because I really needed a break from teaching at the time, I just decided to go ahead and take the risk. So this video will be kind of that research for those out there curious, like I was, about getting into the aviation industry and especially being a flight attendant, that are more or less on the fence about it. This will be a research video, the pros and quickly reviewing the cons, which I went into more extensive detail in my first video. Also, I just wanted to clarify something as well. In my first video about why I quit being a flight attendant, I said that I started training in October 2024. Obviously not, because we're not in October 2024 just yet. So it was actually October 2022. So I just wanted to clear up that mix-up. Anyway, before I begin, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content, and thank you so much, and let's go ahead and get to it. The pay is pretty low in the beginning, and it could be a while before you reach financial stability. Most flight attendants start off with anywhere from $18,000 to about $30,000 a year. I worked mainline, so my pay was about $1,800 and some change a month. This is challenging considering you have to work out of hubs like San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Boston, New York City, Chicago, L.A., just to name a few. And when you factor in rent, car payments, or Lyft and Uber, public transportation, housing, groceries, utilities, student loans if you have any, etc., the first several years will be a struggle if you plan to live in your home base or base city. Something to keep in mind is if you like your own space, first-year flight attendants are going to earn very little, considering the average rent in base cities can range anywhere from $1,100 to $3,200 a month. Even for a studio in New York City or Washington, D.C., which is where I was based and where I lived. To supplement, flight attendants had to work second jobs or pick up trips, and that required working 7 days a week year-round. There are economical alternatives, and the pay eventually gets drastically better. To not go through financial stress, I highly recommend rooming with a classmate or classmates just for a little while. You will very quickly establish a network and make friends easily in in-flight training, and so if you find someone or several people you get along with, and they're based in your city, renting a house, an apartment, or crash pad together will relieve a lot of those economic stresses. You all can even carpool together if you preference trips or standbys together, anything that will make your lives easier. Also, commuting is another viable option. The good thing about being a flight attendant is that you can pass ride to your base city for free, which means you can rent a cheaper place in, let's say, Des Moines or Jefferson City, Missouri, and take a commuter flight to Newark, LA, DC, or wherever your base city is. And I knew a lot of flight attendants that did that. Also, research hotels that offer flight attendant discounts and rates because there are a lot of options out there. And the best way to do that is just asking other flight attendants by joining social media groups, which are aplenty, or you can just ask other flight attendants in the trips that you work. Although I was only able to work as a flight attendant for a year and 8 months because it just simply wasn't for me, I heard you get a significant pay increase after 5 or 6 years or so. Now, there are some hurdles to commuting, and some airlines have a commuter clause in their contracts, so read up on them, and read up on them very carefully. There won't always be space on certain flights, so you have to be cognizant of that, but As part of your benefits, you can purchase a guaranteed seat for a discount, which, for the most part, they are very affordable. Reserve life can be fatiguing and unpredictable. At my airline, reserve life could span anywhere from 6 months to 8 years, just depending on where you're based. Being a reserve means you're on call, and at my airline, we were on reserve 24 hours versus AM/PM reserves like at other airlines. You were at the mercy of crew scheduling, and they could call you at 1 or 1:30 in the morning for a 4:45 or 5 a.m. report time. And that was oftentimes extremely tiring. But in those instances, my rest would be interrupted, and I honestly couldn't get back to sleep. So I'd have to go ahead and just wake up, get ready, shower, have my coffee, eat breakfast, and then head out, with sometimes as little as an hour and a half to 2 hours of sleep. With reserve life, you always need to be present, or I highly recommend that you always be present at your base on your reserve days, because you're only allotted a minimum of 3 hours to get to the airport once they call. If you're a commuter, you'd have to commute in the day before and stay at a hotel or crash pad like my boyfriend Jack does to make sure you report on time in case they give you a trip assignment. It was always exhausting because I was getting called at 1 a.m. for transcontinental turns or transcon 2 days or 3 days with red eyes. And if you were good for 2 more days after your trip was complete, you only get a 12-hour rest period before they are allowed to call you again, even for internationals. But at my airline, though, when it came to internationals, they typically called you midday because our report time was always in the evening. So for internationals, they wouldn't call you at 1 or 1:30 in the morning because, again, those report times were usually after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes on reserve, you could go entire reserve blocks without working at all. Yep, you heard me correctly, and that was one of the perks about being on reserve, actually. At my airline, you were guaranteed 12 days off per month, but they are spread out randomly, so you get like 2 days off here, 1 day off there, 7 immovable days off in between, and so on and so forth. Now, during busy season, it's pretty much guaranteed you'll be used always. But during off-season, if you preference wisely, you could go entire weeks on ready reserve, meaning you stay put at your crash pad or house, and you could do chores, run errands nearby, or sit back and binge Netflix until they call you, if they call you. Even though I was on ready reserve, I did go 12 days in a row one time, not having to work a single trip, and what makes things better is the fact that you were guaranteed 78 hours pay per month, regardless of how little you work that month. If you're seeking supplemental income, a lot of jobs out there won't work with your schedule. A lot of first or second year flight attendants went the second job route versus picking up more trips to make extra money. Unfortunately, the options are slim since most jobs, including retail and the restaurant industry, want you to have a consistent schedule. A flight attendant schedule changes month to month, and most flight attendants I knew couldn't get hired because of that. If you love to fly, you can pick up trips and make good money. Also, my second job recommendation. On your off days, you have the option to pick up trips that are in open time. This is a great way to make a decent amount of extra money, especially if you love to fly. But if not, there is one field always hiring, and that's the field of education. Substitute teachers are in dire need, and you only need a high school diploma to become one. Also, I was a director at a tutoring company, and most tutoring companies like Sylvan and Huntington are very flexible scheduling-wise. Subbing, you can make anywhere from $100 to $250 a day, and you're in charge of your own schedule. You can work as much or as little as you want as a sub. For example, when I subbed in my county, it was an automated system, so when they called, I could either accept or decline assignments. The downside with the system is that it can call you up to 20 times a day, but you can just block them during your trips or permanently and just go online and pick up sub jobs there. Anyway, substitute teaching is perhaps the best and safest option for flight attendants looking for a second job outside aviation. And there are a variety of teaching positions and teaching assistant positions. And when you're a sub, you can teach any grade from grades K to 12 or special education, which is the field that I'm in now. And it's Honestly, just a great way to make a little extra cash. And I mean, especially if you prefer to be grounded on your off days. The supervisors and higher ups can usually work against you rather than with you. As mentioned in my first video, flight attendants are just numbers at most airlines, as was the case with mine. In-flight supervisors and our vice president and CEO were more about looking good for their shareholders, making safety not a top priority. And I had a huge problem with that. The motto, if you see something, say something, was generally ineffective because maintenance would just defer problems with the aircraft and you had to work it even if you still didn't feel comfortable working those aircrafts. And like I said, that was pretty much what influenced my decision to quit, but it's not always going to be the case with everybody. You could be penalized for being ill, and FMLAs were hardly approved right away. My airline worked on a point system, so a certain number of points could amount to attendance or performance warnings, and after 3 strikes, you were out. Flight attendants would receive 2 attendance points for sick outs, but could recoup half a point with a doctor's note. So that's still 1.5 points on your record. And these points show up on your work history, and you see, I had a lot of mixed feelings about it because, I mean, I understand why they do it, but I also feel like a lot of the sick leave, I mean, you do earn. So if you use it up and then you continue to sick up beyond that, I feel like that's when you should start earning points. But again, I mean, that is just my opinion and not everybody's going to agree with it, obviously. Also, FMLAs were hardly ever approved at my airline immediately, even with sick family members and you having a certified medical professional filling out forms and putting their signatures on them. A lot of the times my airline would cite insufficient medical facts to back up illness or family illness, and that was always the reason why my FMLAs were never approved. I had 2 or 3 that I tried to, I mean, with doctors' forms filled out and their signatures, it was not, they were all denied. I mean, obviously, because they think all of a sudden they are medical professionals themselves. Anyway, that's besides the point. But for example, my father's heart attack, he's okay, by the way, it made the fight to get FMLAs approved very challenging. And it was really difficult because oftentimes I had to drop sick on my line or take time off and take the points in order to care for my dad, which I thought was absolutely puzzling. And sometimes the battle, when it came to these sort of things, I mean, that's when I had to choose my battles. I mean, half the time it wasn't even worth it. And, my father's medical procedures following his illness, I was already about to quit anyway, so it didn't really matter. But there were flight attendants that I knew that it took them about anywhere from 4 to 6 months to get their FMLAs approved. And it was just, to me, I just did not understand it. It takes 34 points to get fired. It does take quite a bit to be terminated, and the sick points do drop off your record after a year. So it's not like you call out sick, you get the 2 points, and it's on your record forever. And once the FMLA does get approved, the points you receive for dropping sick on your line in order to tend to your family emergency are immediately wiped away. So yes, you do have to sometimes call out sick in order to take care of family while waiting for your FMLA to get approved. But once it is approved, then it changes in your work history and those points drop off automatically. The schedule is inconsistent and weekends and holidays no longer exist. It's a tough schedule. I'm not going to spray a sugar glaze over a moldy donut because fact is, a flight attendant schedule is very up and down. Also, never plan anything months in advance, especially at the beginning of your career, because most trips you get as a junior flight attendant or on reserve, you have to work them. And you can be used any day, any holiday, so be prepared for that. It could be years before you hold a line. At regional airlines, flight attendants usually get lines right away, but in my main line, it could be a couple of years or more, meaning you will be on call. You will be an on-call flight attendant for the duration of the time you don't have a line. Being on reserve, you have much less control of your schedule, although the more senior you get, the better the reserve line. But at Dulles, for example, where I was based, I was over a year in and far from having a line. In Houston, though, I talked to flight attendants that were with the company 6 years and still were not holding lines yet. Once you're a line holder, though, you have more control over your schedule. As a line holder, you become more and more in control of your schedule as your seniority increases, meaning you get a set schedule for the month and you can trade out of trips and drop trips whenever. Now, be aware that when you try to drop trips, not everyone is going to take them or want them, which means that you would either have to work them or call out sick. But life is easier as a line holder and typically gets better as your seniority moves up. This pro could be applied to number 6 because the more senior you are, your chances of having holidays and weekends off does get better. Not always, but most of the time, which for flight attendants with families, that's something that's very important. There aren't many opportunities for growth. What I found challenging for me was the fact that I felt I learned everything I needed to know once I got on the line, and there really wasn't anything else to learn. For 2 years, I really didn't feel like I was contributing anything to the job, honestly, and the job itself more or less just felt the same, which for some flight attendants I know is a good thing. But I really had developed a number of skills over the years that were useful in the field of aviation, but most other skills, I didn't really have many opportunities to utilize them. Therefore, any opportunities for growth just simply weren't there for me. I just had a difficult time just really more or less doing the same exact thing every single day. And it just, to me, I got bored with it pretty quickly and burned out pretty quickly as well. The job does help you develop skills elsewhere and for other opportunities within the company. Being a flight attendant, on the other hand, is a great way to start for those aspiring to be pilots, for example. You will get a feel for what it's like to be in the air and get used to the chaotic schedules and routes, making you more comfortable in the profession as you work your way to becoming a captain or first officer. Other jobs within the company also include catering management, in-flight supervisor, in-flight training instructor for those who love to teach, which was an option I almost considered, and base directors. And these prospects could allow you to go anywhere and transfer anywhere, which also applies to flight attendants, as every 6 months you could put in for transfers to other cities, including Honolulu or even London. Although, a heads up about London, the wait list is like 1,000 miles long. The benefits that come with being a flight attendant. The job wasn't for me because I consider myself to be a more grounded person. And right now I just want to be close to family, especially after what happened to my father. But if you're an adventurer and explorer, I highly recommend being a flight attendant since it isn't a monotonous 9 to 5 and you're not working with people you may not get along with every day. It offers culturally enriching experiences that, while I felt I wasn't growing as a flight attendant alone, were teaching and learning experiences that helped me view the world with different eyes and see everything in a whole new and enlightening perspective. Yes, the job is physically demanding and the burnout is high. You're time zone hopping constantly. Safety is always a concern. You deal with passengers who can be entitled jerks. And during regular operations, you may get stranded somewhere for hours or days without support from supervisors and crew scheduling. You also have to be prepared to make sacrifices in regards to your schedule, your plans, your relationships, and sometimes your mental, emotional, and physical health. I personally wasn't wired for those numerous changes and those sacrifices, but it didn't matter because I wanted to give it a chance anyway. I was hired and I didn't want to miss out on an opportunity. But as a flight attendant, you get to see the world for free or for cheap as part of your benefits. The retirement benefits are excellent too. Not so much health or dental, but there are a ton of perks. It's a hard life, and it's not for everyone, but flight attendants are crucial to the industry. Unfortunately, we're not always treated that way sometimes. You don't always need to do your research because you have no idea what you'll be willing or unwilling to do or give up for the job. You just make that leap, just take that chance. You just do it and see how it goes. I know I expressed a number of grievances in my first video, but you may have a vastly contrasting experience, a completely different experience than what I went through. On the other hand, and I cannot emphasize this enough, please know your contract. I cannot highlight that. I just cannot put that in the forefront enough because flight attendant life will be miserable if you don't know your rights and if you allow the companies to push you around. You have to be smart and make sure you know what to do based on your rights as specified in your contract. And if your airline is unionized, don't hesitate to reach out to your union first versus your supervisors. That's one piece of advice. I've encountered bullying, harassment, and threats. And if you're unionized, it's best to get in touch with them for sure. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. If you have any questions or if there was anything that I didn't cover or missed, please comment below. Thank you so much for watching. This will be my last video about being a flight attendant, as I am ready to just completely close that chapter of my life and start writing the next one. Everyone, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for subscribing, and thank you for your support. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you in my next vlog about my first week of school as a special education teacher. All right, everybody, have a good night, and thank you.